Are you ready to revolutionize your relationship with money? Welcome to the Finding Financial Freedom podcast with the Frugal Physician, where Dr. Disha Spath will be your companion on this exciting financial adventure. Get ready to conquer debt, build wealth, and embrace a mindful spending lifestyle that will empower you to live life on your own terms.
This show is sponsored by Set for Life Insurance, the ultimate client experience in the insurance industry. Are you looking for the perfect insurance coverage that suits your needs? Founded in 1993 by President Jamie K. Fleischner, Set for Life Insurance specializes in individual life, disability, and long-term care insurance. As brokers, they represent numerous companies in the industry, ensuring that their clients get the best products at the most cost-effective rate. What sets Set for Life Insurance apart? You'll enjoy special discounts, priority underwriting handling, and even exceptions in the underwriting process. So why wait? Contact Set for Life Insurance today and let them be your insurance partner for life. Visit their website at www.setforlifeinsurance.com or call them toll-free at 1-888-553-3559. Welcome to the Finding Financial Freedom with the Frugal Physician podcast, where we explore the world of personal finance and savvy money management. I'm your host, Dr. Disha Spath, and today we have a very special guest who's going to take us on a journey to discover the secrets of credit card points hacking. Our guest today is Dr. Devon Gimbel, a retired physician who turned points travel consultant for high-income professionals, entrepreneurs, and business owners. She's here to teach us how to leverage credit card points to unlock first-class travel experiences without breaking the bank. All right. Hey, welcome, Devon. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Dr. Gimbel, I'm so glad that you're here to teach us about credit card points. I am really passionate about this because it's actually impacted me and my travel so positively over the last few years. We really stepped up our travel game, but there are a lot of minutia and little details that we need to know. And we need to go over exactly what it means to play with credit card points because it is somewhat like playing with fire. I'm really glad that you're here to teach us about it. In case you guys don't know, Dr. Gimbel is the credit card point guru in the women physician finance space. And she's here to teach us a little bit about credit card point hacking. So Dr. Gimbel, will you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got into credit card points?
Yeah, absolutely. So my travel story goes back basically my whole life. I grew up back in the day when we had real mail, like you would receive things in your mailbox that were physical and you could hold, right? Like this was a pre-digital age. And my family used to get National Geographic magazines in the mail. And I was just so captivated by them, the photography, the stories, everything. And I was always drawn, to all the stories of the places that were really far away that I had no actual connection to, in terms of having family anywhere else or any reason to be really drawn to places. But I can just remember sitting in my closet as a kid and reading stories about the pyramids in Egypt. And I just have this visual memory of looking at photography, aerial photography from Botswana in National Geographic and just feeling like I need to go to these places. I need to see these places. And it was wild. I have no idea where this came from because my family was not a traveling family. I was raised by a single mom. We didn't have a lot of financial resources. I was born and raised in Southern California. So our trips and our travel was get in the car and drive to Joshua Tree, and camp, or get in the car and drive up north and look at the redwoods, which were amazing experiences as a child. But I was by no means part of this worldwide traveling family. But I always felt super drawn to travel. And then, fast forward through kind of what happens to a lot of us. You go to school. If you're in medicine, you keep going to school for a really long time. You don't have a lot of vacations.
Right.
I certainly did not have a lot of disposable income as a med student, as a resident. And even coming out of training, when I got my first grown-up job, I still had, all of my student loans to pay back and all of these things. And so for me, travel was always really a big wish. And I didn't feel like I had a ton of access to it for a lot of different reasons, throughout much of my life. And when I came out of training, I knew nothing about money because no one had ever taught me about money. And so I went on a personal finance education journey of my own of just trying to learn about how do you be responsible with money? How do you make money? How do you use money? How do you save money? when none of those things had been taught to me before. And so in learning about personal finance, I started learning on the internet about people who were using credit cards to earn points and use those points to travel so that they weren't spending thousands of dollars on travel. And I thought, if this is not a scam, this sounds amazing. This is right up my alley. You know, like, how can I get something for less? How can I solve a puzzle and then get rewarded, you know, by being able to do something that isn't going to cost me a ton of money? And that's how I really started. This was just a personal hobby for me. And I spent many years just learning how to earn and use credit card points for my own travel, for my own family's travel. And it was so impactful on my own life that then I got to the point where I was like, well, I need to tell my friends about this. I need to teach other people who want to learn, you know, how to do this, because it can have such an important impact on your ability to travel or the type of travel that you have access to.
Agreed. I mean, I'm so glad you mentioned National Geographic, because my uncle used to get these National Geographic magazines and we stayed with him for a little while. And I was just thrilled to see all these, you know, countries and pictures and people that I wanted to experience. Having opened my mind now to travel with our first trip to the United States. And I can totally understand that need to, you know, see it all before we die kind of thing. And absolutely. So I, like you, was introduced to the credit card point journey during my financial education by a friend. And I was looking for a catch. I was like, really? So you're just going to give me these trips for these points that I earn, and there's no catch? I don't understand, you know? So I was very wary of the whole thing, just like you. So can you tell us exactly what credit card points are?
In terms of, you know, what credit card points are, I'm going to start with the assumption that people listening to this conversation are brand new to hearing about this. So I want to talk in like very kind of introductory terms. But the way that I think about this working is that when you think about traditionally just buying something, whether you're buying it with cash or a debit card, or, you know, many people probably already have at least one, you know, kind of very traditional credit card. You go out and you purchase something and you get the thing, right? It's this very basic, I'm going to exchange money in this form and I'm going to get this good or service in return. That's great. You're getting the stuff that you want or that you need to run your life. Now, credit card points are a very specific type of credit card. So not all credit cards can do this, but there's a certain category of credit cards called points earning or rewards cards where they reward you for using that particular type of card to pay for your expenses, because not only do you just get the thing, you know, that you're buying with your credit card, but based on the amount of money that you're spending, you also get rewarded with points. And points can come in kind of different flavors, but essentially points are an additional form of currency. So you can collect them up, and then at some time you can choose, okay, I'm ready to turn my points in or exchange my points and get something from them. And there's a lot of different things that you can get from them, but travel is a big category. Really, what credit card points are, the way that I think about it, is just an additional form of currency that you can accrue in the means of just going ahead and buying the things that you would already buy ordinarily, right? Your groceries. I'm trying to think about all of the things, you know, that we tend to spend money on. I have little kids, and so I think about like the things I have to buy them for school, you know, their clothes and their shoes and their winter boots, you know, and all of those things. You can go ahead and get rewarded by using these certain credit cards to be able to earn points for them.
Now, can you explain to us why we should get into them?
Yes. Okay. So this is a really interesting question. And you and I were kind of chatting about this before we started recording. And I think I have a perspective about credit card points and travel as someone who, number one, uses and loves credit card points to travel all the time. And now I have an actual business where I teach other people to do this. So I'm a very biased person, and I admit that, right? Like, I think that credit card points are amazing for travel, but I actually don't think they're right for everybody. I do not think that every single person walking around needs to have a credit card that earns points or needs to learn how to optimize their points. And so there are two kind of main filters that I think of for people who are maybe listening to this episode and thinking about points for the first time to apply to themselves to determine, wait, is this something that's even relevant for me or useful for me? Or is this something that's great for other people, but I just don't even need to include in my life? And one of the things, and this sounds very basic, but it is true, that I think if you are not someone who loves to travel and really envisions using your points specifically for travel, so for things like airfare or for hotel stays, then I actually think that the deep world of credit card points travel is probably not worth getting into. Like, I think that you can do perfectly fine getting a solid cashback credit card. and just using cashback rewards to defray costs of travel. I think if you don't really want to learn how to optimize points specifically for travel, then I actually don't think these types of cards that you and I are talking about, the points earning cards, are going to be that relevant for you. So first of all, if you're someone who just doesn't have a deep interest in travel, that's fine. Maybe don't spend a lot of time getting multiple different points earning credit cards. I just don't see how that would really benefit you. But for the people who love to travel, love the idea of being able to earn, like I was saying, this alternate form of currency that can either defray the cost of travel for them or get them outright free travel in some circumstances, there's one thing that people need to be very, very clear about rewards travel credit cards. And that is the way that a lot of these credit cards and these credit card companies make their money back, because they're not just giving away points for free, is that these rewards credit cards have extremely high interest rates. Please do not be confused about that. And when I say high, I'm talking 18, 20, 25% interest rates. And so for me, the number one rule of getting into credit card points and points travel is that if you cannot or do not pay off your credit card statements in full every single month, if you're not in the position to be able to do that, do not get these cards. Because if you cannot pay your credit card statement off in full every single month, then whatever value that you might be able to get from these points, it's going to be obliterated by the interest that you have to pay. So for me, kind of that number one rule, after someone is identified as thinking, oh no, I would love to be able to use points for travel, is, okay, well, let's just look at where you are in your life right now. And if you are not yet in a position where you can pay off those credit card statements in full every month, I say, wait, these cards will always be there. You can always get them later. Do not get them until you are in a position where you feel really comfortable and confident handling your finances that way. Those are kind of the two main filters that I think people can apply to themselves immediately, is like, would I actually use these points for the thing that they have the most value for, which is travel? And am I in a position where I'm going to be able to use these credit cards such that it's only going to be a net positive for me? And not everybody is going to answer yes to both of those questions, and that's fine, right? But I think as part of my love of educating people about this, I don't benefit at all if people get into using credit card points when it's not the best choice for them. So I really want people to be able to make that determination, from themselves, knowing their own situations, their own patterns to begin with.
That's so important. I'm so glad you said that too, because it is somewhat like playing with fire. If you let that credit card balance sit and accrue interest, it will quickly drag you under. And the credit card companies know that. So make sure that you are not accruing debt in this process and paying that card off every single month if you're trying to play this game. What are some specific credit cards? Say you decided that this is for you. You love to travel. You have, enough income to make sure that you pay off all of your debts, and you're simply defraying your everyday spending or shifting them from one card to another. So you decided to get into this thing. What are some specific credit cards or reward programs that you would recommend for beginners in the credit card points hacking space?
Yeah, this is a great question. And before I answer it, I want to give just, again, like a little bit of background information so people can kind of understand the way that this world works. And I think there's a lot of people who you probably have at least heard of, or maybe you're already carrying around one of these rewards cards without really realizing it. If you've ever lived at an airport hub, and if you're someone who's had to travel a lot for work, maybe you're already carrying around like a Delta credit card or an American Airlines credit card. These are actually rewards credit cards. When you use them for your expenses, you're earning points or miles, depending on what kind of card you have, for the money that you're already spending. So first of all, some people may already be walking around with some of these cards in their pockets or in their wallets. But one of the big differentiators in terms of points is that there are kind of this family of points that are referred to as transferable or flexible points. And these are the ones that I think tend to be the most valuable for people to collect. The reason they're called transferable points is because you earn them in a particular bank's points currency. So there's one example is Chase Bank, right? So Chase Bank has a bunch of different rewards credit cards, and their transferable points currency is called Chase Ultimate Rewards Points. Now, when you earn a transferable point, the reason they can be so valuable is because you are not locked into using those points on one single airline or one single hotel. Instead, all of the major transferable points currencies, of which, if you're based in the United States, we have about 5 of these major transferable points currencies. When you have them, you actually are able to transfer your points out of your credit card account and to a number of different airlines or hotel loyalty programs that are kind of on a menu of your specific transferable points currency. And so the benefit of that is, like I said, you're not limited. If you have like a Delta credit card, all of the miles that you earn from that are Delta miles, which is great if you only want to fly Delta or if there's really great points deals on Delta. But if there aren't, then you're kind of locked in. You can't do anything else with those points. But the beauty of the transferable points is that you're not locked in to one airline or hotel. You have access to like 10 or 15 different airlines that you can transfer your points out to. So for people who are beginning, I personally think it makes a lot of sense to get your first rewards credit card in one of these transferable points currencies, because there's just so many more uses to those types of points when you do end up where you've got a lot of points and you're ready to use them. So I mentioned there are 5 of these major transferable points currencies. There's Chase points, American Express points, Capital One, Citibank, and then there's this kind of new player on the block called Bilt. And Bilt has only one credit card that you can get that earns you points. But the reason this has made such a splash in the world of points and miles is because it's the only credit card that makes it very easy for you to use points for rent. And for a lot of people who do not own their own home, rent is one of their biggest expenses. And so my recommendation is to start with one of these 5 major transferable points currencies and get one single points earning credit card in that points, we call them ecosystems, in that points ecosystem. And first, just get used to using one rewards credit card on a regular basis to earn points. And again, making sure that you get into that habit of paying off that statement in full every single month. So I tell people you can always get more cards. You can always add cards to your credit card portfolio. Don't start out thinking you need like 5 or 6 right away. Just pick one, get used to using it, and then you can always add to your credit card portfolio.
Yeah, I love that. That's kind of how I started too. I started by getting the Chase Sapphire Reserve 5 or 6 years ago, and just kind of getting used to that space and realizing all the benefits that it has and how quickly it earns points. And then I made some of the common errors that people make when they start getting into the space, like booking travel through the Chase portal instead of transferring it out to the partner. I then started to realize there are a lot of tricks here that I'm not knowing, that there's this huge gap of space where people that use credit card points and, get some use out of them. And then the people that really maximize their use of these points and have all these tips and tricks of how to get the most out of the points. So what are some key strategies or tips for maximizing credit card points that you've come across?
Yeah, so I'm going to again start with people who are just brand new to this hobby, because I'm not going to tell you sort of the things that I employ now as someone who's done this for 10 years and has a lot of different credit cards. I don't think you need to jump to that point immediately. But for people who are first getting their feet wet, and these might sound really obvious, but again, these are things that until you shift into kind of this community and this world, maybe not things that are really obvious to you. So number one is, of all of the things that you spend money on regularly, to actually use a points earning credit card for as many of those expenses as you can. I think a lot of us have some expenses where we're just used to paying it directly out of a bank account, or we're just used to using, a debit card or something like that. And those are not bad things to do. But if one of your goals is to maximize the number of points that you can earn, again, for the things you're already spending money on, to me, kind of the first step is, let's just shift all of the expenses that we can theoretically pay by credit card. Let's just make sure that we're actually using a points earning credit card for those expenses. And what I see a lot of people doing in the beginning is maybe you have some store specific credit cards. I know I definitely did when I was in residency and, I needed 20% off my first purchase, at like a certain store. I would take advantage of those store specific cards. So first, just look at how I'm actually paying for things right now. And if I wanted to use one points earning credit card for as many expenses as I possibly could, let me just get first into that habit of rolling over my expenses to that one credit card. That's going to first enable you to make sure that you're always earning points for an expense if you can. And then kind of the next step up from there is, this is when you're ready to have more than one rewards credit card. is what you will notice is that a lot of these points earning credit cards want to incentivize you for using that card on a specific category or several specific categories of purchases. And the way they do that is they say, hey, we're not going to reward you with just one of our points for every dollar you spend. But if you use our credit card for a certain type of expense, like grocery expenses or travel expenses, we're actually going to give you more points. And so what you'll see is that, again, for people who actually want to really kind of get into this hobby, not just be, very beginners in it, is that many people do end up carrying more than one credit card. And the reason they do that is because there is no one perfect points card that's going to get you tons of points for every type of expense. And so kind of the next step after getting used to one rewards card is starting to look at, where do you tend to spend the most amount of money in terms of categories? And can you match yourself up with rewards credit cards that then give you increased bonus points for those categories of spend? And I think those first two steps, honestly, take a lot of people through that very beginning phase of using credit cards.
Okay. I see a lot of people opening cards for the sign-up bonus. Can you explain what that is and how that plays into the strategy?
Yes, absolutely. So all of these rewards or points earning credit cards, again, credit cards are big money for banks, right? They want people to open up credit cards, to use their credit cards, because the vast majority of people do carry a balance, which is where these banks are making their money, right? And so one of the incentives that rewards credit cards offers to people is something called a welcome bonus, which is essentially a one-time incentive in the form of a big bucket of points that you can earn the first time that you apply for or get approved for a new rewards credit card. And these always come in the form, again, of a points incentive. So it may be something like open up this new credit card and earn 75,000 points as a welcome bonus, or earn 100,000 points as a welcome bonus. And the thing that you just need to be aware of is that you have to qualify for that bonus. So it's not just get approved for the card and the points magically fall into your account. All welcome bonuses have what's called a minimum spend requirement, which is how much money do you have to put on that specific card in a certain time frame after getting approved for the card in order to earn the welcome bonus. And every single card will be very explicit about what this is. It's not a mystery. It's on the credit card, application form. But for personal credit cards, this is very commonly something like spend $4,000 on the card in the first 6 months that you hold it, or spend $500 on the card in the first 3 months that you hold it. And once you meet that minimum spend requirement, then you get this incentive of the welcome bonus. And the reason that these are so popular is that this is oftentimes the easiest way to earn a lot of points very, very quickly. If you're thinking about spending $4,000 and then earning 90,000 points, that's a huge rate of return on your spend. You're not going to have that same rate of return once you move past the welcome bonus period and you're just using that card for your regular everyday spend, even if that card offers a really good bonus category and you're really maximizing that out for your spend. So one of the things to be aware of is that welcome bonuses are great. They're, like I said, a very easy way to earn a lot of points fairly quickly. But in my opinion, it is not a sustainable strategy to think, well, I'm just then only going to be earning welcome bonuses. Like I'm basically going to apply for a new rewards card every single time, I have expenses so that I can earn this, because at least this is true for me as part of a dual physician household. Our level of expenses is such that if we only ever wanted to be earning welcome bonuses, frankly, we would probably have to, between my husband and I as two individuals, be applying for 4 new credit cards every month or two. And that, even as someone who loves credit cards, I have no interest in doing that. Like, I don't want to be applying for that many cards. I don't want to hold that many cards. And so for people whose overall expenditure over the course of an entire year is maybe, $20,000 or $30,000 total, then I think that that's the type of person who can really benefit from kind of always opening up a new credit card once they've met a welcome bonus, because they might be spending at a rate where then they're opening up, maybe 3 or 4 new cards a year, which I don't think is preposterous. But for someone with a higher level of spend, I don't think that it's really reasonable or desirable to rely only on signing up for new credit cards to earn welcome bonuses, because for a lot of us, that is just unsustainable and not particularly compelling. Like most of us don't want to spend our time doing that. And so I think that this is where having a strategy, if you really want to get into this hobby, comes into play, where welcome bonuses play a part for sure. But at least for me, having personal spend and I run a business that has business expenses, I find personally that the majority of my spend over the course of a year is not actually going towards qualifying for welcome bonuses. And that's where then being really strategic about the cards that you pick comes into play, because then you are going to be using a certain set of personal or business credit cards for your ongoing sustainable spend. And that's why you want to make sure that you have cards that give you really good return, again, for those categories that you just tend to spend money on.
What does opening up all these cards do to your credit score, and how do you keep up with them?
Yeah, so that is an amazing question. I actually think one of the biggest misconceptions around getting into the world of credit card points is this is going to tank my credit score, right? I think a lot of people, who come to these types of conversations, maybe sort of like us, where we went on a personal finance education journey and we don't want a really low credit score. We understand the utility of it in terms of being able to, get approved for a mortgage or just getting approved for other types of loans with lower interest rates, right? And so I think it is a very, very common misconception that if I go out and open up 3 new credit cards in a year, or over the course of a couple of years, I open up more credit cards than that my credit score is going to tank, and therefore I don't want to get into this. And I think that if there had been a very high risk of my credit score suffering from this, I would not have wanted to get into it either. But the misconception, I think, comes from the fact that many of us are not taught about what factors actually influence your credit score to begin with, and then understanding when you open up new credit cards, how does that influence these individual factors? And so I'm not going to go through an exhaustive account of what happens in your credit score, but I do want to make 2 points about what opening credit cards does potentially to your score. And the first point is that the number one factor, the highest weighting factor in determining your credit score, is your on-time payment history. So whether you have a single credit card or you have 25 credit cards, if you are paying your statements on time, that is going to have the single highest, most positive effect on your credit score. So again, it does not matter if you have 1 card or 100 cards. If you are on time with your payments, that factor of your credit score is going to be strongly positive. Now, the second factor, and this actually does come into play with the number of cards that you have, this is the factor that I think most surprisingly positively impacts your credit score that people aren't aware of. And this second factor is your credit utilization ratio. And all that means is that of all the credit that is available to you, how much of it are you tending to use at any given time? And what happens with your credit score is that when your credit score takes the snapshot, of kind of all your monthly balances and all of what you're doing on your credit and factoring into your credit score, is what they're looking at is, okay, if you're using the vast majority of the credit available to you, banks actually see that as a risky behavior. They don't want you to do that. They want you to have a ton of credit available and not actually use it. And this is what makes no sense to me, because I think for so many of us who consider ourselves financially conservative in terms of not being reckless or risky, with our money and with our finances, I think so many of us, again, depending on especially what your background is, your childhood, what you were taught about money and finances, so many of us think it's responsible to have 1 credit card, right? It's not responsible to have 20 different credit cards. But what happens is that if you only have 1 credit card, and let's say the credit line on that credit card is $20,000, okay? If you only have that 1 credit card, even if you pay it off entirely every single month, but you use a lot of that credit that's available to you, that is hurting your credit score because you're having a high credit utilization ratio. Let's say you put $15,000 of expenses on that card every single month. So you're using 75% of the credit available to you. Again, even if you pay it off every single month, right? You never, never, never are a day late. Because you're using 75% of the credit available to you, that is actually going to hurt your score. This has never made sense to me at all, but really what credit card companies and banks want is for you to have a ton of credit and not use it. And so when you actually open up multiple credit cards, they each have their own credit line, right? So the overall amount of credit that's available to you goes up, but you are not actually spending more. You're only spending what you would always spend anyway. It's just that now your ceiling is a lot higher in terms of the amount of credit available to you. And so now let's say that same person opens up 2 more cards and now has $100,000 of credit available to them, but they're still putting $15,000 a month on their cards. Their credit utilization ratio has dropped from 75% to 15%. That impact of having a low credit utilization ratio is the second most important factor in your credit score. And so when more credit's available to you, but you're not actually using it, that has a profoundly positive impact on your credit score. And this is what I think surprises so many people is they say, hey, my credit score was very good. Then I opened up multiple credit cards, but maintained all of my financial habits. And my credit score has actually gone up, even though I've opened up 5 new credit cards, or even though I've opened up 10 new credit cards. Again, not in a short period of time we're talking about here, but over the course of a year, 2, 3 years. And I think that is one of the things that people really do need to spend a little bit of time educating themselves about if no one has ever taught them before. What are those 5 main factors that influence your credit score and what actually happens to each of those individual factors when you do open up a new credit card? I actually have an entire podcast episode on it. So if people just want the easy way to learn about it, you can just go back and listen to a podcast episode that I recorded on it. But I just want to assure people from my own personal experience and from what I've seen from people in my community who I've taught and worked with is that, again, if you have very, very good payment habits of always paying off your statements monthly, actually opening up new credit cards either keeps your score same level or for a lot of people actually increases your credit score over time.
Yeah, I can attest to that. My score has climbed over 100 points since I started opening up credit cards. For this reason, the credit utilization went down. Do you recommend closing cards when you stop using them?
That is a great question because what happens for a lot of people too that I see, especially if there are ones who say you've been holding, that one emergency credit card that you've had forever, right? The one that you got when you were in college or you were in medical school. And now you're realizing, oh, wait, there are other points earning cards that I actually want to get and put my expenses on instead. So again, you would think, what is financially responsible? Let me close down a credit card that now I'm not using or I just don't have an intention of using again in the long term. This is where, again, it makes no sense. I wish people would do a better job educating us about how these things work, but you don't actually want to close down a credit card, especially if it happens to be your oldest card or just a card that you have held for a long time for many years, because one of those other 5 factors that influence your credit score is the overall age of your credit accounts. And so if you have a card that's 10 years, 15 years old, and you close it down, that is actually going to hurt your credit score because it's going to shrink the overall age of your cumulative, credit card accounts put together. And so, especially if your oldest card or card that you're considering shutting down has no annual fee, so it's not costing you anything to keep it open, I usually recommend that people don't shut it down, put it in some place that's safe where you're not going to lose it. So literally in a safe if you have one or a safety deposit box, and pull it out once a year. Maybe just put one charge on it to keep that account active, but you don't actually want to outright close down a credit card account.
You mentioned fees. As you know, these cards aren't free. A lot of the points earning cards do have fees. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, in the world of rewards credit cards, there's over 100 of these different points earning cards that you could get. I don't actually have all of them. I don't think I ever will. I don't want all of them, but I do have a number of rewards credit cards, and they can have an annual fee, which is essentially the fee that you get charged to have that type of credit card and keep the account open. Some of them have annual fees that can range anywhere from $0, so it doesn't cost you anything to have the card, all the way up to the very premium, sort of top of the line, rewards credit cards in the personal space can have an annual fee that is not insignificant, up to $695 a year, right? So that is a lot of money, and anywhere in between. So there are cards that have an annual fee of $95 a year. There are cards that have an annual fee of, $200 or $300 a year, again, all the way up to almost $700 a year. So you do have to be very deliberate when you are thinking about opening up a new credit card, at looking at that card and first of all, understanding what is the annual fee and what do I get from this card? And in my own personal usage of this card, does that justify the annual fee? Because that answer is going to be different for everybody. And so one of the things that you want to look at is what are the different credits that come with that card, especially the very high annual fee cards. Almost all of them offer credits in some way, shape, or form. Now, obviously, if you don't shop at the stores where the credits are offered, or if you don't take advantage of the types of things that the credits are offered in, then that's not going to be useful for you, right? So you need to look at what are the credits that are offered, or what are the perks or benefits that are offered by this card? And do I imagine myself getting enough utility out of those perks or benefits that for me personally, it would justify paying this fee? And one of the things that you may find is that answer changes over time. I think for the most part, with a lot of these rewards credit cards, that certainly the first year that you hold the card, I think that there is utility, even in the very high annual fee cards, specifically because you can earn that welcome bonus the very first year that you hold a card. And so for a lot of us, earning that welcome bonus is enough to justify holding the card for at least 1 year. But then after that, you want to reevaluate and say, on an ongoing basis, is this a card that I use enough, that I get enough value from, that this fee is worth my paying it? And so especially if you are in a position where over time you want to accumulate multiple credit cards, taking into account how much are all of these cards combined going to cost me to carry and hold, you want to make sure that you do the math and make sure that you're getting as much or more value than what you're paying, obviously, in the annual fees. And what I can say for myself is that, especially once you learn really how to get great value out of the transferable type of points, that it makes it a lot easier to justify those fees. But if you're someone who has no interest really in learning how to maximize the value of your transferable points, then holding on to some of these premium level travel credit cards probably is not going to be a good fit for you. And maybe you want to focus more in on the entry level cards that have no annual fee, or sort of the mid-level cards that have much lower annual fees.
Okay. If we decide to get rid of them, we would not close them, right? We would just downgrade them to the free card.
Yeah, so that is a great option. Once you've held one of these cards for at least 12 months, which you absolutely want to do, you don't want to get any of these rewards cards, earn the welcome bonus, and then say, hey, I don't need this card long term. Let me cancel it after 5 months. That's a terrible idea. It can really negatively impact your relationship with that particular credit card issuer. Sometimes there are rules and regulations around they can take the welcome bonus back if you cancel the card right away. So first of all, always hold one of these cards for at least 12 months. But after you've held it for 12 months, if you know this is not a card that you want to carry for the long term, yeah, instead of closing it down, what you can do is something called a product change, which is just like a trade, where you can trade in that one particular card that you have for a different rewards credit card offered by the same bank or issuer. And they almost always have a no or very low fee version of a credit card that you can trade it in for. And the benefit of that is, one, you stop having to pay a really high annual fee that maybe you're not getting a lot of value out of. And two, again, it keeps that account alive and open. So that's not going to have a negative impact on your credit score because you're not actually closing the account down, but you're trading it in for a card that makes a little bit more sense for you to carry for the long term.
Great. Another pitfall I wanted to mention, you mentioned mortgages earlier. If you are in the underwriting process and you're applying for a mortgage, that is a terrible time to start a new line of credit that would set off flags for the mortgage underwriting team. So that's something to keep in mind if you are applying for a mortgage.
I am nodding my head vigorously. Yes. And what I can tell everybody, just again, from my own personal experience, I started learning about these cards, almost 10 years ago now. It was really around 2013, 2014. And I had applied for a mortgage. My husband and I bought our first and only home that we've ever owned together in 2014. But we subsequently had refinanced a couple of times over the years as interest rates were going down, and it was a great time to refinance. If you know that you at some point in the near future, in the next 6 months, in the next year, want to be qualifying for a mortgage or considering refinancing your home, it's not a problem. It's just that's not the time to start signing up for new credit cards. So you can still be learning about this. You can still be making your plans and thinking about, of getting that mortgage approval when you get on the other side of refinancing your home. Then what card do you want to get at that point? So you can always take pauses in this hobby, right? You can sign up for a card or two and then not for a year or two if you don't want to. And so, yeah, I just want to reiterate that point that especially if you know a mortgage or a refinance is coming up, put the brakes on applying for any new credit cards for a little while.
So we talked a lot about the minutia of credit card points. Can you tell us about some success stories and how people have used these points to have significant savings and travel experiences through credit card point hacking?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I'll start with myself because this is just what I did for myself and my family for many, many years because one, it was so much fun for me. It felt just like solving a puzzle and getting great travel on the other end of it. And I also want to kind of add the caveat that this is what I've learned to do over a number of years. So this is not, learn about this for, a couple minutes, listen to a podcast, and this is what's going to happen in your first month of having cards. But I do want people to understand, this is actually possible. And so for me, actually, the very first time that I used points after I started learning about them is I had a conference that was in Paris. I'm based in the Chicago area. And the very first real flight I took using points was I had booked myself on a flight to attend this conference in Paris using my Chase points, which is the only type of points I had at the time. And I booked a first class flight on Lufthansa Airlines. And that was bonkers to me because, again, I was a kid who grew up when we flew, it was always, in economy. It was always the most basic version. I mean, I had no exposure to anything like this before. And so to fly first class, which not even every airline has internationally, sometimes there's an economy and a premium economy and a business cabin, but a few international airlines still maintain first class cabins, which is just unbelievable and is something that personally, I can't imagine ever actually spending cash money on. Even if I won the lottery, I could not justify spending cash. But I flew first class by myself, which was an amazing experience, from Chicago through Frankfurt to Paris and then home again. And a round trip ticket using points at that time, because again, this was a number of years ago. But at that time, that entire ticket was less than 200,000 points. And that is, if you wanted to book that in cash, I mean, easily a $15,000 ticket. That was just one flight I took that year. That was just one flight. So for me and my family now, again, sort of being where I'm really in this hobby, and even before I did this as my job, as my business, my family routinely gets, honestly, $80,000 to $100,000 worth in travel every year from our points. But we are a family that has personal expenses. My husband and I both own and run our own businesses. So we have the luxury of having business expenses that we can really leverage to earn points as well. But I am by no means like just some crazy outlier. I mean, I have people who easily are flying themselves and their families, business class for a trip every single year somewhere. People who are using their points, for their kids' vacations to go and defray the cost of a hotel, which for those of you with school-aged kids know, if we are limited to traveling during these very, very confined dates during the year when everybody else is traveling and all of the hotels are crazy expensive, if you can use your points and not have to pay $5,000 for a week in a hotel for your family, that's an enormous savings. And I would say, honestly, for a lot of people in my community, in the physician community or the community of people who are business owners or self-employed, who learn how to do a very, not beginners, but you don't have to be an expert level to do this. Within a year of learning, how do points work? What are going to be some of the best credit cards for me? People are easily saving thousands of dollars a year on travel. I mean, it's just, there's so much low hanging fruit in terms of flights that are very easy to book using points, hotels that are very easy to use booking points, that it is not hard to easily get $5,000, $10,000 a year in savings for people, again, who don't want to make this their full-time job.
Yeah. So how are the hotels and airlines getting paid when we use points? I mean, someone's got to be paying for it.
Yeah, I mean, these are very, very complicated systems that, frankly, I do not have a lot of knowledge and background in, but there's an enormous business based on these loyalty programs. So airline frequent flyer programs, hotel loyalty programs, about who gets paid what when you book using points. And again, I don't know all the details of that, but what I do know is that now for many airlines, they actually derive more money, more revenue from their loyalty accounts than they do from their actual paid flights, like from the revenue they generate from people actually buying tickets. So these are enormous profit centers for a lot of these businesses. All I know is that they bank, for the most part, on people earning points and either never using them because they just forget about them, they expire, or people don't really learn kind of where are some of the areas where you can get a lot of outsized value for these points. So the banks and the airlines and the hotels, they would not do this if it was ultimately a huge revenue loss for them, right? You have to remember that the vast majority of people who have credit cards, again, are paying interest, which is a huge amount of profit for these banks. The vast majority of people who even carry one or two rewards cards don't yet have a really, really strong understanding of how can they use those points, again, to get outsized value. So the credit card companies aren't actually incurring a big cost for the most part when someone uses their points and redeems it for a gift card to Subway. That's not going to cost a credit card company very much money, right? And just to give people some context here is that if you have some of these transferable points, you may have even noticed this before. Say you log on to your Chase account if you have Chase credit cards, or your American Express account if you have American Express credit cards. And if you have points sitting there, let's say you have 100,000 points, your credit card company oftentimes will assign a value to that and say, hey, your 100,000 points are worth $1,000 in travel, right? Where if you just book your travel through your credit card company, your points have a value assigned to them. And that's great, right? If you have 100,000 points and you save $1,000 on flying your family home for Thanksgiving, wonderful. That's $1,000 that you don't have to spend of your own hard-earned money. What they're not telling you is that those points have potentially a lot more value if you learn, again, where some of these opportunities to maximize are. Because you can also use 100,000 Chase points or 100,000 Amex points, and that's almost enough to book a single round-trip business class flight from the States to Europe. And at least from what I've seen from ticket flights, ticket costs lately, those are going to cost you a lot more than $1,000 out of pocket. But the vast majority of people who have points, they are not learning, how do I get this outsized value from it? And so this to me is where the real opportunity is. I think when you get into this hobby and you've got people in it as well and you talk about it, you think, oh, everybody's doing points this way. But I think the truth is the vast majority of people are not optimizing the way that they're earning points. They're certainly not optimizing the way they're using points. And the credit card companies, again, are definitely benefiting from people who are paying interest. And so they're the ones making out ahead. So I think there's this really small segment of the population who is actually really, really getting tons of value from their credit card points. But that is possible when you know how to do it.
This sounds like a whole world of ways to save money and, really up-level your travel. I know that my family and I, we have enjoyed the premium perks of travel with these cards like the lounges, along with the free flights and the upgrades and such, the companion certificates. There's just so many perks if you like to travel and you have credit card points and you're using them effectively to maximize how well you're living and how well you're traveling while also saving money. So I think this is a huge space for my listeners to learn about, a huge topic to kind of get familiar with. And if you guys would like to learn more about credit card point hacking, Devon, where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me in a couple of different places. First of all, I mentioned that I have a podcast, which I really try to gear towards people who are first learning about these concepts, these topics, and breaking it down in a way that it's easy to learn bit by bit. So if you want to learn more about it, you can find me at the Point Me to First Class podcast. Do a lot of teaching there. You can also find me on my website, which is pointmetofirstclass.com. And for people who are ready to really accelerate their points learning and want to figure out how do I become a person who isn't just kind of playing with these points and getting a couple $100, a year in value from these. I really want to learn how to be that person who's getting $10, $20, $30,000 worth of travel every year from these points. I actually offer a course where I teach you exactly how to do that. And honestly, why physicians, employed professionals, business owners are in the perfect position to really maximize this hobby. That course is called Points Made Easy. So if you want to really learn how to get amazing at this, you're welcome to join me inside Points Made Easy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Devon, for coming on and sharing all of this valuable information with us. And I can't wait to have you on again one day and talk through some more of the minutia. And you guys, please make sure you go out and check out Devon's podcast. And I love your Facebook group as well. There's a lot of community there and a lot of people asking good questions and giving good answers. So thank you again. And I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much for having me. Same to you.
Thank you. I wish you many luxurious travels in the future.
Same.
A big thank you for our sponsor today, Set for Life Insurance. No matter what your insurance needs are, Set for Life Insurance has you covered. They're a nationally recognized leader in disability, life, and long-term care insurance, serving clients across all 50 states. Their dedicated team specializes in assisting medical residents, physicians, dentists, business owners, and other high-income professionals. That was such an amazing conversation. I felt like I learned a lot. I hope you guys learned a lot about credit card point hacking. I know credit card points have been a huge player in how I maximize kind of living life while also saving money. And I hope that for those of you who are interested in travel and know you can pay off your statement balance at the end of the month, every month, I hope that this is useful to you if you've been thinking about getting into credit card point hacking or credit card rewards in general. There's a lot to be learned still. This is just an intro, so make sure you go and check out Devon's podcast and her course if you really want to dive deep into how to completely maximize the points that you're earning and spending them wisely. In the meantime, we hope to have Devon back again to teach us a little bit more. And if you have any questions, any concerns, any comments, please email me at thefrugalphysician.com. Don't forget to leave our podcast a 5-star review on your podcast streaming platform so that we can spread the word and get this knowledge out to others so that everyone can start living their best life while saving money and earning their financial freedom. Thank you so much for listening today. We'll see you next week. Have a great day.
The content shared on this podcast should not be taken as individualized financial advice. We are here to share our knowledge and experiences, but it is crucial to consult with professionals such as accountants, financial advisors, or attorneys who can provide personalized guidance based on your specific needs.